What's up, cool people? My name's Matt, aka That Random Christian Gamer. Welcome to tonight's live stream, where I am starting my slightly shortened stream schedule. In case you missed it from last week, and come to think of it, I really should put this out as like a stated, specific post on my social media. But basically, as of the end of last week, or really today, I'm cutting back an hour from what I had on my live streams before. So they were like about 3 hours each. Now they're going to be closer to 2, just to give myself some more time to do some other stuff that I really should be taking care of. But otherwise, it's well, I would say it's going to be our standard kind of Bible study stream, but not exactly. The Bible study portion, yes, that'll be like the same. After that, though, I might be looking for a little bit of help with something, a little bit of input potentially on something that I am going to edit a little bit later. Long story short, after I finish each book of the Bible in the Bible study, I try to make a video that sort of summarizes it, but I like to use verses from the Bible to summarize the books like that. So I take like a few from each chapter, a few verses from each chapter, and then use that as kind of my summary, or at least a significant part of it. I don't yet have the verses picked out to highlight for that Ezra summary, so I will probably be thinking through that during today's stream. And if you're in the chat and have thoughts on that as we're going through it, feel free to chime in with what verses you think maybe should be highlighted. And then if we got some time after that, which we probably will, I'm thinking I'll just hit up some Power Wash Simulator, start a new thing in there, and then we'll just kind of chill, chat, hang out, talk about whatever's going on or whatever's on your mind. Or mine, if things wind up that way. So, that's the gist of what's going on tonight. Yeah, not too much else to really say about all that. So I think I will go ahead and run the first set of ads on the Twitch side of things. All you folks over there, I will see you in a bit. And then we'll get to Bible study. YouTube folks, you will get to see me as I transition things here, because I don't have the ability to run ads like that on YouTube stuff. I think YouTube just takes, you know, the video archive version of the streams, and for whoever has ads on their channel and gets revenue from those ads, it just kind of plops those in wherever it feels like. But anyway, so yeah, I did start a little bit on the later side of when I usually try to. Just a little bit of something I was trying to take care of. Also trying to prep for the stream and see what all... Hey! Owl! Welcome! I don't know if you can hear me right now, or if the ads are rolling for you, but... Hello? Hope you're doing well. Yeah, it has been a little while. You can't hear me? Okay. Perhaps slightly delayed, but that's totally fine for the most part. I don't think that'll really have any major effect on my plans for tonight's stream anyway. So nice to see you, Owl. I think I will go ahead and get the Bible study rolling here. I'll get into context for what I'm about to read once I hit record. So here we go. Okay, well, I guess I can answer your question about how I'm doing before I really get that going. I'm generally doing all right. Just making a few little changes here and there, as you might have heard, just to try and prioritize other things a little bit more, and just overall try and just make things better for myself. Take care of myself a little bit better, even. I'm also sorry to hear that you're not doing the best. If you feel like letting me know what's going on or what's on your mind, feel free. Just know that in amongst Bible study stuff, I might kind of literally got here when I commented in chat. You're right, yeah. So, long story short, I tell you what, I've actually been recording this whole time. Let me go ahead and stop that and delete that bit. Anyway, so yeah, long story short, cutting back roughly an hour from each of my 2 weekly streams, just for, I'm hoping I'll be able to accomplish various things a little bit better with that. Like, there's some upkeep, mostly cleaning of my apartment, that I haven't been doing the best with. Maybe a couple more hours each week, I'll be able to do that a little more often. And then schedule appointments, do some other things to just take care of myself a little better. And also, I might be a little bit in a better position to actually start getting a little bit more ahead on my video schedule rather than just keeping up, which is pretty much all that I've been doing since I moved into this apartment. I think mostly even just since I started the new job. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of what's going on with me and what I'm hoping to accomplish with some of these little changes here. So yeah, anyway, there's the general gist on that. As I said before, feel free to let me know if you're so inclined what's going on with you. I am totally down to talk about that, even amidst Bible study stuff. Just know if I'm in the middle of that, I might not get to what you say right away. So, with that being said, maybe now I'll actually get started on said Bible study. Okay. Right. Yeah, sorry to hear that, you know, I mean, if I recall right, you have had a lot of cats that you've helped take care of, but yeah, still doesn't make it any easier when you lose one of them. So, I'm here for you, although I'll be honest, I don't know if there's really much that I could say from experience regarding that. I have not personally had really any pets that I have taken care of. My little sister had a pet rabbit for a while, but that was really mostly while I lived in Texas, so I can't speak much to the experience there. Anyway, okay. All right. Hopping into Bible study now. feel free to keep chatting as you're inclined. So, we are looking at Nehemiah chapter 3. So, essentially what has happened is the people of Israel / Judah, God's people, descended from Abraham and Jacob and them. They had their kingdom, but it split, and then a while after the split, it all got conquered. They were then kind of exiled, certainly living away from Jerusalem for a while. But then one of the Persian kings is like, hey, God told me he wants a new temple built in Jerusalem. Go do it, you people who worship him. So that's what happened in Ezra, pretty much. Nehemiah comes in kind of in the midst of that whole rebuilding effort, except Nehemiah heard about the walls in particular and how there was not really any protection for the people living in Jerusalem. And so he was burdened in his heart with wanting to repair the walls and the gates. So he got permission from the king, despite being his cupbearer. Fairly important role. He got permission from the king of Persia at that time to go and fix the walls. So he has made it there. He's assessed the damage. He's got the people's supports who are living there. Some of the other locals nearby aren't so much in favor of it, but those are people who didn't really like the Israelites to begin with. So anyway, that's kind of what leads us into Nehemiah chapter 3 here. Sorry, looking at chat here, making sure I don't ignore it for too long. Gotcha. So this was one that you had a particular attachment with. Got it. Yeah. That makes it especially tough. I can at least imagine that. So, yeah. The loss is never easy to get over. And, everybody does it in their own way and in their own timing. I hope that your other days are a bit better, and whatever you might have gained and learned from the experience of taking care of this particular cat, maybe that can carry on some impact and do some good for you in the future. Okay. So, here we go. Nehemiah chapter 3. Then Eliashib the high priest and the other priests started to rebuild at the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set up its doors, building the wall as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and the Tower of Hananel. People from the town of Jericho worked next to them, and beyond them was Zachar son of Imri. Fish Gate was built by the sons of Hassenaah. They laid the beams, set up its doors, and installed its bolts and bars. Meremoth son of Uriah and grandson of Hakkoz repaired the next section of wall. Beside him were Meshullam son of Berechiah and grandson of Meshezabel, and then Zadok son of Bana. Next were the people from Tekoa, though their leaders refused to work with the construction supervisors. Okay. So it seems to me that this effort in rebuilding the wall is rather than have everybody focus on one section, the plan is having them kind of spread out over various parts of it. I say wall singular sometimes. I mean, the entire exterior, however many actual wall sections that might have been. It may have actually been more like repairing instead of a completely fresh rebuild, but whatever it was, the work was clearly being done, divided into different sections, which, depending on how many people they had working on it, it might not have been practical to have everybody work on the same section, because it might be a too many cooks in the kitchen type of situation, if you catch my drift. Would be a lot of people also potentially just sort of standing there with minimal tasks and, not really helping the overall effort progress any quicker because of that. Yeah, because it's got like Eliashib and others starting from the Sheep Gate, people of Jericho next to them, Fish Gate being built by another group of people. So yeah, it's sort of it's a division of responsibilities rather than all right, everybody do this. The only kind of outlier so far is the people of Tekoa not really wanting to work with the designated construction supervisors. Not entirely sure why that would be the case. I mean, as long as they were doing the work and doing it well, hopefully that wasn't a problem. Rather than all in one part, spacing everyone out based on their individual talents and strengths. Yeah, that could have also, people's different knowledge, skills, abilities, all that kind of stuff might have played into who worked on what section and all that. Because some of them seemed to more so have focused on the gates, whereas others were focusing on the other wall sections. So yeah, there's multiple factors that could have played into the division of the work. Okay, so we left it off at verse 6. We'll continue from there. The old city gate was repaired by Joiada, son of Paseah, and Meshullam, son of Besodiah. They laid the beams, set up its doors, and installed its bolts and bars. Next to them were Melatiah from Gibeon, Jadon from Meronoth, people from Gibeon, and people from Mizpah, the headquarters of the governor of the province west of the Euphrates River. Next was Uzziel, son of Harhiah, a goldsmith by trade, who also worked on the wall. Beyond him was Hananiah, a manufacturer of perfumes. They left out a section of Jerusalem as they built the broad wall. Okay. What do they mean left out a section? I don't know. Mostly more of the same, other than it's mentioning some of the skills that these people had now in a bit more detail. I don't think it mentioned priests and such above, but not really anything like where it mentions Uzziel being a goldsmith by trade here. Not sure what manufacturing perfumes would have to do with repairing a wall, but I mean, first of all, people can be, talented at multiple things, and, second, I guess there was the manufacturing part, so maybe they could have aided in streamlining that part of the process. Who knows? Otherwise, pretty similar to the first section. Let me look at these notes here. Where it says the Old City Gate could be read as the Mishnah Gate or the Jeshana Gate. I'm guessing Mishnah or Yeshana are derived more directly from the Hebrew, And it might have been called both of those at various points. I'm not sure. But it's probably better to list all the things that it was potentially called so that there's no confusion over which one it might have been for anybody that would have known any of those names for it. Now the Hebrew here, where it mentions the Euphrates River, it just says the province beyond the river. This footnote has come up a bunch in Ezra and Nehemiah because of, the fact that that area was controlled by the Persian Empire at the time, which expanded well beyond just, that region that was the promised land. So whether they called it beyond the Euphrates River was the main river that they often referred to in the Hebrew in prior books of the Bible, and saying beyond the river probably fits for that particular area because the Persian capital probably would have been on the other side of that. I'm not sure exactly how far, in which direction, but if I recall correctly, that was probably roughly in the realm of modern-day Iraq, or maybe Iran, one of those two. So, beyond the Euphrates, from the capital of the Persian Empire, would have been, that area that was the promised land of the Israelites. Anyway, note here at the Broad Wall. So, could say they fortified Jerusalem up to the Broad Wall, which that to me would make a little more sense. That seems a little bit more cohesive with what's going on as well. It's like, they were working on these various sections, and it's like, okay, they did all this other stuff up to this certain point at the Broad Wall, rather than making it seem like they skipped over something in the midst of what they were doing. In any case, either way you look at it, though, it implies that at least some of it wasn't quite being worked on just yet. Alright, verse 9. Rephaiah, son of Hur, the leader of half the district of Jerusalem, was next to them on the wall. Next, Jedaiah, son of Haramath, repaired the wall across from his own house, and next to him was Hattush, son of Hashabneiah. Man, that's a lot of syllables in there. Anyway. Then came Malchijah, son of Harim, and Hashub, son of Pahath Moab, who repaired another section of the wall and the tower of the ovens. Shallum, son of Halohesh, and his daughters repaired the next section. He was the leader of the other half of the district of Jerusalem. The valley gate was repaired by the people from Zanoah, led by Hanun. They set up its doors and installed its bolts and bars. They also repaired the 1,500 feet of wall to the Dung Gate. The Dung Gate was repaired by Malchijah, son of Rechab, the leader of the Beth Hakerem district. He rebuilt it, set up its doors, and installed its bolts and bars. Alright. So, I don't necessarily know if all of them were more specifically working on sections close to their houses, but it definitely mentions that for at least one of the people in here, especially in verse 10. Jedaiah, son of Haramath, repaired the wall across from his own house. So if he was doing that, it's not too far-fetched that the others were working on sections close to their houses. Which in a way also makes sense, because there would be less time walking or doing whatever kind of traveling they would have had to do to get to a different section of the wall. So that probably also played a factor in who worked on which sections. Now, how much all of this was planned by Nehemiah and some of the other leaders or supervisors, I don't know. It hasn't said. But I can definitely see that, the number of people and the skill sets thereof, all potentially factoring in. Okay. Other than that, it all seems pretty similar to what we've read so far in the chapter. Other than the people who worked on the Valley Gate also working on some of the wall. I don't think the other gate workers were mentioned as also working on wall sections. Hebrew there, instead of 1,500 feet, says 1,000 cubits. And I'm sure the, 1,000 cubits was just kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? The calculation to change it to feet in this part of the text or meters in the note was done by the translators. Or they used some other note that mentioned the conversion. That's the word I was thinking of. Conversion. Okay. I think we left it off at verse 15. Still got a little ways to go, so let me not linger too much on what I've currently read. Or what I've already read. Anyway, verse 15. The fountain gate was repaired by Shallum, son of Kolhoseh, the leader of the Mizpah district. He rebuilt it, roofed it, set up its doors, and installed its bolts and bars. Then he repaired the wall of the pool of Siloam near the king's garden, and he rebuilt the wall as far as the stairs that descend from the city of David. Next to him was Nehemiah, son of Azbuk, the leader of half the district of Beth Zur. He rebuilt the wall from a place across from the tombs of David's family as far as the water reservoir and the house of the warriors. Next to him, repairs were made by a group of Levites working under the supervision of Rehum, son of Beni. Then came Hashabiah, the leader of half the district of Keilah, who supervised the building of the wall on behalf of his own district. Next down the line were his countrymen, led by Binnui, son of Henadad, the leader of the other half of the district of Keilah. Next to them, Ezra, son of Jeshua, the leader of Mizpah, repaired another section of wall across from the ascent to the armory near the angle in the wall. Next to him was Baruch, son of Zabbai, who zealously repaired an additional section from the angle to the door of the house of Eliashib the high priest. Meremoth, son of Uriah, and grandson of Hakkoz, rebuilt another section of the wall, extending from the door of Eliashib's house to the end of the house. Okay. Gonna pause there for a little bit more. I also had a thought about it mentioning the different districts before, and I forgot to mention that. So, I don't know exactly how large Jerusalem as a city was, especially at this time, but you've got all these different districts being mentioned, and now, once again, people living in those districts or in charge of those districts are mentioned as fixing parts of the wall that relate to their district. Kind of is another mention of people repairing stuff close to where they would have lived. Makes sense. Again. Now, I think we're also in some of these verses getting into, like, people had already mentioned repairing one section. Also, probably after they were done with that, moving to a different section and helping to repair that. So, might not have been entirely just based on where they lived. Or it was just, I mean, there was one of the verses in here about somebody being kind of like especially zealous, I think was maybe the word that was used. Essentially being all like gung-ho about it, wanting to help as much as they could. So they were like, well, this section I was working on is done. There we go. Next to him was Baruch, son of Zabbai, who zealously repaired an additional section. So that sort of implies, at least to my understanding, that like he had his section he was working on. He finished that and he's like, all right, I know we're not totally done yet. What do you want me to do next? So then he worked on a different section that hadn't been finished yet. Notes to look at. Verse 15, where it mentions Shalom. That comes from the Syriac version. Hebrew reads Shalun with an N. One letter difference. Although Shalom has come up as a name before, at least in other books of the Bible. I don't know if I've ever seen Shalun with an N before. So maybe the translators just tried to keep it more consistent with what they already knew was a Hebrew name. Talking about the Pool of Siloam. Hebrew says Pool of Shelah. Another name for the Pool of Siloam. Okay. Another name for it, possibly at a different time. In any case, same place being mentioned there. Whichever name somebody would have known it by or called it at that time. Note down here in verse 18. That comes from a few Hebrew manuscripts, some Greek, and the Syriac version. Most Hebrew manuscripts read Bavai rather than Binuai. Okay, just a differentiation in the name and the spelling of it, I guess. And that's something else that, like, translators have to deal with that probably most people don't really pay much attention to. It's like, all right, we've got all these different manuscripts, and like some of them have parts missing because they're old and a bit broken. So going with the oldest one and or the Hebrew isn't always possible. So like sometimes you got to pull from different translations, and then trying to still keep the overall translation consistent despite going with these different manuscripts could be a challenge. And so, yeah. Anyway. Just a different possible name mentioned there is all. On to verse 19. Let's see what else was repaired. Next to them being the countrymen led by Binui, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, next to them, Ezra, son of Jeshua, the leader of Mizpah, repaired another section of wall across from the ascent. Did I read that already? Near the angle in the wall. Yeah, I think maybe I read that. 22 then. Yeah, because I remember reading about the angle in the wall already. So, verse 22. The next repairs were made by the priests from the surrounding region. After them, Benjamin and Hashub repaired the section across from their house, and Azariah, son of Maaseiah, and grandson of Ananiah, repaired the section across from his house. Next was Binui, son of Henadad, who rebuilt another section of the wall from Azariah's house to the angle and the corner. Palal, son of Uzai, carried on the work from a point opposite the angle and the tower that projects up from the king's upper house beside the court of the guard. Next to him were Pedaiah, son of Parosh, with the temple servants living on the hill of Ophel, who repaired the wall as far as a point across from the water gate to the east of the projecting tower. The water gate to the east and the projecting tower. Then came the people of Tekoa, who repaired another section across from the great projecting tower and over to the wall of Ophel. More people being repeated, doing multiple sections. Above the horse gate, the priests repaired the wall. Each one repaired the section immediately across from his own house. Next, Zadok, son of Immer, also rebuilt the wall across from his own house, and beyond him was Shemaiah, son of Shechaniah, the gatekeeper of the east gate. Next, Hananiah, son of Shelemiah, and Hanan, the sixth son of Zalaph, repaired another section, while Meshullam, son of Berechiah, built the wall across from where he lived. Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the wall as far as the housing for the temple servants and merchants across from the inspection gate. Then he continued as far as the upper room at the corner. The other goldsmiths and merchants repaired the wall from that corner to the sheep gate. Okay, so literally the entire chapter is just talking about the wall being rebuilt, who rebuilt which sections, and, you know, if it's at all relevant, maybe some of their trades or skills or things of that sort, or maybe who they were descended from, if that was of any importance as well. But otherwise, I don't think I really have anything new to add. It's all just more of, all right, this section right here was repaired by this person, or this group of people. Anyway, so yeah, that's Nehemiah chapter 3 for you. And that's just the one chapter that I had planned. Chapter 4 seems to be a bit shorter. Hopefully I can still fit that in before the cutoff at the first hour of the stream. Let me get a sip of water here real quick before I hop into chapter 4. Also, random note, new water bottle in case people didn't notice. My old one stopped, like, staying down when I tried to put the mouthpiece down. So, yeah. Anyway. Anyway, hi Seth. Hope you're doing well. You were here since I started. Okay. I appreciate the viewership even in silence. Or, you know, lurking, as some might call it. Okay, on to the next chapter. Here we go. Okay. Sorry, real quick. Chat again. So, Owl, this water bottle was just like it was like a $10 I think Mainstays was technically the brand. It's a Walmart brand essentially. So, I don't know if they have Walmart where you are. And if that's the case, you might not be able to get it. Although, I mean, Walmart's not just a US company, right? So, anyway. But yeah, it's just like a, I want to say roughly 24 ounce kind of metal, bottle part, and then the mouthpiece. The mouthpiece is actually like kind of a hard plastic, which is different from my old one. The old one was a softer, either a soft plastic or more of like a rubber kind of mouthpiece. Which also led to it getting dirty a bit easier because the softness of it kind of left stuff getting stuck in there. When it came to drop off Christmas presents, he swept his arm straight across the table and punched my... Okay. Gotcha, yeah. But yeah, I tend to look for water bottles that have the, kind of drinking spout thing at the top. Anyway. So there's that. Now, Bible study. Here we are at Nehemiah chapter 4. Events in Nehemiah thus far, at least, pretty much involve him as the cupbearer of the king of Persia, hearing a report about the people living in Jerusalem, the exiles who had returned, not being very well protected because the wall was broken in all sorts of different places and ways. So he prayed about it first and then asked the king for permission to go help rebuild the wall. He got the okay, went to Jerusalem, assessed the damage, told the people what he wanted to do. They're like, yeah, let's do it. And then the previous chapter was pretty much just the rebuilding of the wall and who did what sections and all that kind of stuff. Chat real quick. Oh, yeah. Beverage pulp and straw. Mine gets that. Mouthpiece is plastic, but the straw inside is the soft straw material. Gets really bad pulp residue. Yeah. And mine, at least the mouthpiece part, was getting to the point where it looked like it was kind of starting to turn. It was kind of turning black in a way, even despite attempts to scrub it out with a literal straw cleaning brush thing, and soap. It was stained onto it at that point. So yeah, I couldn't even clean that out. So for that reason, I had already been thinking about getting a new water bottle, and then the mouthpiece kind of broke and wouldn't stay down. So, I mean, I pretty much only drink water from my water bottles. So, I think that was, I mean, I guess it was a combination of whatever little bit of something was in the water, little tiny microscopic bacteria or things like that. But then also the fact of my mouth being on it, and sometimes I would drink it during meals, and so maybe little bits of food residue were getting in there. And anyway, so all that to say, new water bottle. I kind of like it. I just have to be careful about putting it close to my mouth, because if I bring it up real close real fast, I might kind of hit my teeth on the hard plastic mouthpiece, which is not fun. Okay. Here we go, Nehemiah chapter 4. Sanballat was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the wall. This is coming from Nehemiah's perspective. He flew into a rage and mocked the Jews, saying in front of his friends and the Sumerian army officers, What does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing? Do they think they could build the wall in a single day by just offering a few sacrifices? Do they actually think they can make something of stones from a rubbish heap, and charred ones at that? Tobiah the Ammonite, who was standing beside him, remarked, "That stone wall would collapse if even a fox walked along the top of it." So, yeah, Tobiah and Sanballat have already been mentioned as people who didn't like the idea of Jerusalem being rebuilt. At least the wall, if not the whole temple that was being built in Ezra. Tobiah was an Ammonite. Ammonites didn't exactly get along super well with Israelites before they had all gotten conquered by Persia. So, yeah, it's no surprise that they come along and A, don't like what's going on, and B, decide they want to just insult the Jews / Israelites who are working on all this. Note there at verse 1. Verses 4, 1 through 6 are numbered 3, 33 to 38 in the Hebrew text. Do feel like thematically, if it's going to keep continuing with, these guys or others opposing the rebuilding, that splitting it this way is a little more thematically connected then. But yeah, dude, Sanballat's here just calling people names. Poor, feeble Jews. And also, who said they were going to try to build it in a single day? And clearly they were working on it actively and not just offering sacrifices. Yeah. Dude's just being mean. Probably because he doesn't like the people as a whole. Note they were talking about the sacrifices. Meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. Okay. I'm not sure what else we could say about that then. Tobiah apparently thinks it all looks really weak or unstable. Then we get to verse 4. Then I prayed, "Hear us, our God, for we are being mocked. May their scoffing fall back on their own heads, and may they themselves become captives in a foreign land. Do not ignore their guilt. Do not blot out their sins, for they have provoked you to anger here in front of the builders." At last the wall was completed to half its height around the entire city, for the people had worked with enthusiasm. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs, Ammonites, and Ashdodites heard that the work was going ahead and that the gaps in the wall of Jerusalem were being repaired, they were furious. They all made plans to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw us into confusion. But we prayed to our God and guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. Okay, so first off, Nehemiah, note, he doesn't take this just as a personal insult or anything like that. He's considering this an insult against God, because these are his people and his sort of chosen city that are also being insulted here. So, what does he do about it? He prays to God. Basically like, hey, these people are mocking us, and in a way you, because we're your people and this is your city. Don't just let that slide, God. Note there at the end of verse 5, or near the end of it, rather than, "for they have provoked you to anger here in front of the builders," it could read, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. I mean, again, insulting God's people in a way was also kind of insulting God. But especially, you know, if there were any other people involved in the building process who were not actually Jews, then it's like, all right, these people are trying to make us look bad in front of other people, and if they really start thinking that we and our God are capable of so little, that reflects poorly on the God we believe in. So they complete the entire wall to half of its height. But half the height, well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's half the protection, but I'm sure there was a reason that it was built up as high as it was before. So, I mean, at least half the height covers the entire perimeter to an extent. So there aren't, like, any significant gaps where people could just, like, sneak in if it wasn't specifically guarded. With the whole thing being built to half height, they could at least, you know, like, have the gates closed and not worry so much about unwanted people or just attackers sneaking in. Not saying it was impossible, but at least it made it more difficult. Because they couldn't just, you know, walk right on in. They'd have to scale the wall to some effect. Anyway, note here in verse 7, okay, talking about the numbering. 7 through 23 are numbered 1 to 17 in the Hebrew text. Yeah, again, I think thematically dividing it up the way that it is here just fits better. Okay. They did also guard the city day and night to protect themselves, though. So, I mean, you definitely... They definitely still would have needed that to some extent. Any well-protected city had guards. Even if the wall was completely fine. Built to full height, no gaps, no structural issues. So, yeah. They're still guarding it. Then we get to verse 10. Then the people of Judah began to complain. The workers are getting tired, and there is so much rubble to be moved. We will never be able to build the wall by ourselves. Meanwhile, our enemies were saying, before they know what's happening, we will swoop down on them and kill them and end their work. The Jews who lived near the enemy came and told us again and again, they will come from all directions and attack us. So I placed armed guards behind the lowest parts of the wall in the exposed areas. I stationed the people to stand guard by families, armed with swords, spears, and bows. Then as I looked over the situation, I called together the nobles and the rest of the people and said to them, don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord, who is great and glorious, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. So, the people are getting kind of tired of this. It doesn't say how long they've been working, so it's possibly quite understandable. And I think, you know, the insults and threats from their enemies kind of contributed to their overall morale, and thus their enthusiasm, their feeling tired of doing this. I mean, especially since, building up even higher on a wall in some way or another had to be a little more difficult because you got to get it up further. Whatever stone, brick kind of stuff that you're using to build the wall, you got to get it up higher now. More threats in verse 11 there as well. Other Jews from outside Jerusalem, I guess, hearing the threats and being worried. I mean, because maybe they were going to get attacked too. Or maybe they didn't necessarily live outside Jerusalem. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily think all the Jews who returned from the exile were necessarily all living inside Jerusalem. So, anyway, people being worried about these threats. But Nehemiah is like, hey, God can protect us. Trust God, and also do your best to, protect what matters to you. Note there at verse 12, it says the meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain, probably for the part that says they will come from all directions and attack us. Maybe some of that or all of that. In any case, yeah, just it speaks to the worry of the people. Because they keep hearing these threats, they're getting more and more worried that they're going to be attacked. Okay. On to verse 15. When our enemies heard that we knew of their plans and that God had frustrated them, we all returned to our work on the wall. But from then on, only half of my men worked, while the other half stood guard with spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. The leaders stationed themselves behind the people of Judah who were building the wall. The laborers carried on their work with one hand supporting their load and one hand holding a weapon. All the builders had a sword belted to their side. The trumpeter stayed with me to sound the alarm. Then I explained to the nobles and officials and all the people, the work is very spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. When you hear the blast of the trumpet, rush to wherever it is sounding, then our God will fight for us. We worked early and late, from sunrise to sunset, and half the men were always on guard. I also told everyone living outside the walls to stay in Jerusalem. That way they and their servants could help with guard duty at night and work during the day. During this time, none of us, not I, nor my relatives, nor my servants, nor the guards who were with me, ever took off our clothes. We carried our weapons with us at all times, even when we went out for water. Sorry, I added the word out there. Went for water is all it says there. So, they are still continuing to build the wall, but now they're doing it with extra precautions in place to be ready for an attack. Which, I mean, what else can you do aside from completely stopping the work on the wall and just being prepared for the attack that they weren't 100% sure was ever going to happen? So if they didn't really know they were going to get attacked for sure, then why would they put all of their energy into being prepared for that attack? So rather than do that, they kind of split it half and half half the people just focused on guard duty, the other half focused on continuing to fix the walls. And they had these measures in place with, you know, pretty much everybody having weapons, even the builders, you know, having horns at the ready to signal other people where to go if they got attacked. So, yeah, that's the general idea. Apparently, Nehemiah and those working closest with him were especially vigilant throughout this. Taking off their clothes, in case you're wondering about that, I mean, obviously would have left them unprotected, you know, themselves. And or would have made them have to take the time to get the protective clothes on in order to be ready for an attack. So, instead, they just said, all right, we're just always going to be ready. At least as ready as we reasonably can be. Carried our weapons with us at all times, even when we went for water. Note there says it could be read as each carried his weapon in his right hand. The Hebrew reads each his weapon the water. Meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. Huh. Yeah, that's like not really a full English sentence at least. But, I mean, if I were gonna try to translate that, I would probably come up with something similar to what it says in the main text here. Yeah. Don't really have too many other thoughts. Repairing of the wall continues. Even if, with some extra security measures put in place. But that's pretty much the general gist of Nehemiah chapter 4. Okay. So, that does it for the planned Bible study portion of things. Now, there will be an ad break coming up here on Twitch pretty soon, even if I don't initiate it myself. And we have a request for some random exercise. I gotta get my stuff real quick. Again, I really should just, like, put a sticky note up here that, like, when I start streaming, get this stuff so it's already ready. And I don't have to get up to go get it when the point redemption is made. Anywho, stream exercises. There's that note. Okay, so what do we got here before we roll into the ad break? We have a 5, which is planking. Alrighty. And I rolled a 2, which I guess would typically mean just 20 seconds. Because I know I ain't doing that in segments of a minute. 5 or 6 minutes would be quite a lot. Now I may switch it up a little bit, do like 20 seconds kind of on my elbows like I've typically been doing, but also maybe 20 seconds straight arm. Or flip that order, maybe. Anywho, let me go ahead and prep for that since ads are about to start rolling here on Twitch. Alrighty. Also, let me get this stuff out of the way for the dice rolling and all that. Okay. So yeah, after this, I'm asking y'all for a little bit of a favor, but let me do the exercise first. Hey-ya. See, Twitch is still telling me that ads are starting soon. It said that for like an entire minute. Or at least that's what it seems like. It seems to run them quicker if I trigger it myself. I don't know why. Okay. Let me pull up my timer here. Get it to 20 seconds. Or maybe I should just set it to 40 and transition. Or, tell you what, I'll set it for 45 seconds. And just keep an eye on it. That'll give me about 20 seconds to do the straight arm plank. 5 seconds to do the transition down to the on the elbows version, and then the other 20 seconds for that part. No ads for Owl. Well, yeah, I don't know, like, the ad experience seems to be different for everybody. Some people will say they're back from ads sooner, others say they don't get ads at all sometimes. It's weird. In any case, should be done for everybody pretty soon, according to what I'm seeing from Twitch. Alright. See it like that. Alright. So, for those of you who are away, I've set my timer for 45 seconds. I'm gonna just have a look at it myself. I'll do the first 20 seconds straight arm plank. Use, well, no more than 5 seconds, I would hope, to transition down to my elbows then and do the rest of the planking time that way. Okay. So, gotta also keep this close to where I'm gonna have my hands. Here we go. So, what have y'all been up to this week? I, of course, have been working, pretty much doing the normal thing. Okay, there's the first 20 seconds. Now I'm down like this. Yeah. I'm gonna have to put in some vacation time soon for my work, though, because otherwise I'm coming up on my hire date anniversary, and if I don't use my, okay, time's up. If I don't use my vacation time by then, I'm gonna lose some of it. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be all of it, at least not right away, and I would possibly get compensated for it anyway, but they really kind of want us to actually use the vacation time as vacation time. And I wouldn't necessarily mind getting some more time off. Okay, so I will go ahead, roll for some more exercise. I could go straight into round 2. Either that or I do it after the next hour and before I would raid out or anything like that. Even though I am cutting back on the stream times, it's still not... It's never really been a strict cutoff. In any case. Okay. What do we have for our second exercise? Bloop. That looks like a 4, which is... let me get back to the... Jumping jacks. Okay. I wouldn't necessarily mind going straight into that. Still playing games after Bible studies? I generally will be, but A, only for an hour-ish. And also, B, this week is going to be a little bit different, because, as the title suggests, I'm looking for a little help with picking highlight verses from the Ezra Bible study. I have a video I'm planning to make on that soon that isn't something I necessarily stream, but would like to, while we're on the topic of Bible stuff, kind of get some notes out of the way for that. Okay, so, jumping jacks. Some multiple of 6. And, looks like times 5, so at least 30. Yeah, I guess I'll just go ahead and get right into that. I do need to get the exercise mat off of the floor for that, though. So give me a sec. So yeah, with whatever time is left after I get these notes taken care of from the book of Ezra, I'll get into a little bit of Power Wash Sim and just kind of chill after that. Could always end early. I mean, sure, yeah, but as it is, it's already gonna seem early compared to prior weeks because it's an hour shorter. Okay. Right, jumping jacks. That's what I was gonna do. Got distracted with the talking for a sec there. Okay, here we go. And yes, I know I'm wearing slides. A little bit better grip on the floor that way. There we go, jumping jacks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 23, 24, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Okay. So I guess Owl has a suggestion of rating J8 Live when we're done, I guess. Or never mind, it is not simply a suggestion. It is a point redemption to guide the raid. Alright. Yeah, if he ends up for some reason ending his stream before we're done, then let me know, and Owl, you can pick somebody else before we raid. Alright. So, Now's the part where I'm asking for a little help. Let me go ahead and bring this window back up. And then get us into Ezra. So, essentially, what I like to do, if you didn't hear already, yeah. Okay, my playlist must have cycled through. Anyway, so essentially, I'm looking for, a couple of verses, might be 3, probably no more than 4 per chapter in this case, to sort of summarize the events of what's going on. I like to do this kind of thing as a way of summarizing each book of the Bible after finishing the Bible study of said book. So, yeah. Titles of the sections definitely help with deciding all that. By the way, this is something I usually do by myself off stream. I just was like, I need to get to this sooner rather than later, because if I want to get this summary in before any of the Nehemiah Bible study videos come out, it's got to be published basically by Sunday. So, Ezra 1 mentions Cyrus allowing the exiles to return. So I would very likely, I try to pick verses that, like, don't necessarily use the, like they don't necessarily need extra context beyond just what has led up to this particular book of the Bible. Just state, why am I just stating the titles? So, Cyrus allows the exiles to return. There's chapter 1. Essentially. So any verses we pick would probably relate to that. Name them. Okay. Seth, I appreciate your desire to help in this process. I'm kind of like, I guess in a way it's something that I sort of do without even really realizing it when I do this by myself. Right. So the main premise described, oftentimes the main premise described is kind of the same as the section title, though. But essentially what happens is that King Cyrus tells the people that the Lord wants him to build a new temple in Jerusalem. And then priests, Levites, basically people who were God's people or who worshipped God at least, kind of came together, gathered some supplies, and Cyrus kind of lays out some of that as well, what they should try and take and how. I don't really like this little table thing in here and the way that that's laid out, but anyway. I guess he also had some things from the first temple you know, because he took it over from when the Babylonians came and took over. So basically he has some stuff specifically designed for use within the temple once it's rebuilt. So, yeah. Cyrus says, hey, God told me to build a new temple. Priests and Levites and other people who worship God are, it says they're stirred, or their hearts are stirred. And then as they're gathering supplies, Cyrus is also like, hey, I have this stuff specifically for use in the temple once you finish it. So the verses that I think get into this the best, again, trying to do it without needing too much outside context. I'd say 1 and 2 kind of summarize, you know, who Cyrus is and what he's doing, why he's saying what he's saying. Verse 5 kind of gets into, you know, the people who wanted to go back and rebuild the temple. And then I'd say probably verse 7, as far as talking about the articles and the objects that were meant to go in the temple. Like maybe verse 11 as well. I don't want to get to too many verses per chapter. So I definitely wouldn't include any more than 5 per chapter. Normally I try to keep it to 2 or 3 for longer books of the Bible, but this one, since this one only has 10 chapters, I'm willing to sort of flex that a little bit. I mean, I guess looking a little closer at verse 1, it's not completely necessary. Because verse 2 says that it's King Cyrus of Persia speaking, and that God told him to build a temple at Jerusalem. That's really probably all that's needed to convey that idea. Verse 1 only really mentions the connection to Jeremiah's prophecy. So I will definitely... Actually, I should just do this. Verse 1 does state a little bit of context. But right now I'm thinking if I were to cut out any of the verses that I've mentioned, it would be verse 1. Verse 5... I mean, verse 5 at least makes it clear that, you know, there were some people who worshipped God who indeed wanted to go back and rebuild the temple. So it is sort of important for at least communicating that point, and it wasn't like making it clear that Cyrus wasn't just like, okay, have at it. Connect back to which premise stated, though. Because there were kind of multiple things that I mentioned. As a way of thinking, if I were to write a paper on chapter 1 of Ezra, what verses are necessary to make the argument? Anyway. Yeah, I know what the general definition of a premise is, or a main argument of it, but it's like, if I'm trying to, summarize the events, it's like not necessarily just one specific theme in each chapter. Now, I could maybe instead of verse 5 include verse 3, but I think one of those two should be stated. I think one of those two should be included to say who went to do the rebuilding. And I think realistically, saying whose hearts were stirred to do it goes a little bit beyond just Cyrus saying, hey, you people, go do this. So, out of those two, I would highlight verse 5. So, King Cyrus brought out articles that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the Lord's temple in Jerusalem. So there is that. Now I'm rethinking that a little bit and wondering if maybe actually verse 6 and or 7 maybe should be included just as a way of saying that they were given some sort of supplies to take with them, even if it was just valuables that they could purchase the building materials with. But I mean, again, Cyrus did specifically have the stuff from the first temple. They both kind of speak to the same points in a way, although 7 is a little bit more specific with it. But I think 6 maybe states the general idea. Because, I mean, Cyrus bringing out the articles from the temple doesn't necessarily say what happened with them. Verse 6 clearly states that these supplies were given to the people who were going to rebuild the temple. So in terms of fully stating what happened, I guess verse 6 is a bit clearer with that. Yeah. So I guess I'll keep 6. 11 isn't really so necessary. It just kind of says how much stuff there was. And I mean, it does outright state the fact that all that was brought along, but that's very much implied by the fact that they just got the stuff in the first place. I'd say 11 isn't really necessary to convey the core of what's going on, no. So I could... Yeah. I guess I'll just leave it off at that. Okay. Are there any others for consideration? The only other thing, it was like, okay, so do I mention then that Cyrus specifically... I mean, it says brought out, but it could also easily be implied in light of verse 6 that King Cyrus brought this stuff from the old temple out to give that. So 7's kind of a borderline one still. But I think I would rather... I think I'd rather keep it to fewer verses that really just get to the core idea. But yeah, I could definitely mark that as a different color for now. And I'm probably going to go back in here and like... I don't necessarily want these to be highlighted as I read them, so I'll probably go back later and take my own notes on which ones I want to read. This just kind of preps them for later. Oh, right. So Ezra chapter 2 is about the exiles who returned with Zerubbabel. And that's literally all that it is as far as section titles. So yeah. Premise. I mean, the vast majority of the chapter is literally just listing who went, you know, who went to Jerusalem, at least in this particular wave. And sort of different subcategories of them. It's like, okay, men in general who returned, then it gets into priests, and then Levites, and then temple servants. Mentions another group that returned, but even that's like, how necessary is that? 3 families of priests also returned. Might not even need too many this time. Yeah. Do. And then it mentions upon returning, some of them gave some offerings. Honestly, since we're not actually going to get into the list, because why Why would I do that? Why would I mention specific people and not others? I think we could just skip straight down to verse 64 here to start that off. Maybe also include 65 since that says in addition. And then I'd probably also include 68 and 69 just because of the whole, you know, people giving offerings. And it also kind of mentions what they gave in those verses. So I'm pretty much thinking these two verses and these two verses. None of the rest seems especially necessary. Because, like, knowing where exactly they settled afterwards, it is a thing that happens, but how much detail is necessary to communicate the main premise? That might be a green one. Any that could be removed. I mean, how necessary do we think it is to say what was voluntarily offered when they returned? Because if that's not considered necessary, then verse 69 could be removed. And that would actually then leave me a little more inclined to I don't even know if necessary is quite the right word to use here, so much as important, because, I mean, is it necessary that we know how many people returned? But at least with regards to the overall happenings of the chapter and summarizing that, so essentially summarizing the exiles that returned to Jerusalem, 64 is an absolute must. 65 is also kind of important. '68, kind of important because it at least generally mentions what also happened when they returned. Knowing how much was offered, less necessary. So maybe unhighlight that. Yeah. The green one also kind of ties into what happened upon their return. We're saying, oh, you're saying maybe keep 69 but have it green? Gotcha. Yeah, I guess that as well. really, if push comes to shove, I could record reading all of those verses, and if I decide, okay, it's longer than if I decide it's longer than I want it to be, then maybe I could shave off some of this, some of these green highlighted verses. Okay, but that's definitely all I would consider to be relevant, or all I would consider to be important to note in Chapter 2. So, Chapter 3, the altar is rebuilt, and the people begin to rebuild the temple. Those are the sections. Premise of Section 1 and only Section 1. They rebuild the altar first and foremost before doing any of the other work on the temple. So this, I would say, is a must, because it states that they put in effort to rebuild the altar and why they wanted to rebuild the altar. It does mention them celebrating the Festival of Shelters, but I mean, the general premise there is that, well, they were then using the altar. Priests had begun to sacrifice burnt offerings to the Lord. This was even before they had started to lay the foundation of the Lord's temple. Yeah. That, I mean, yeah, I definitely consider that important to note as well. The fact that they did that before even laying the foundation for the temple. When I'm doing these summaries, I don't necessarily like to include just part of a verse, because it would be real easy for people to say, could I just highlight that sentence? Probably. I don't think so. I need to, like, click on the verse for it to let me highlight it fully and keep it. So essentially the answer to your question is no, I cannot highlight just the sentence. And honestly, having some mention of when they began to sacrifice the burnt offerings is also kind of relevant. That can sort of be a placeholder for what I was thinking in verse 3 that would have been relevant, even though that mentions a different thing slightly. So I would probably stick with just verses 2 and 6 for that section. So then for the other section, main premise of section 2 is, I mean, yeah, it is essentially that they start rebuilding the temple. And I think, at the very least, it gets to completing the foundation. Noting when it began might be nice, but also this is a really long verse. Construction of the temple began in mid-spring, but there's all this other stuff too. During the second year, workforce was made up of, like, do we really need to know who all was in the workforce? Not necessarily that much. Maybe green, sure. Now verse 10 mentions, when they completed the foundation, so it makes it clear that the foundation, at least, was complete. So after it was completed, or when it was completed, priests put on their robes and took their place to blow their trumpets. So that 11, with praise and thanks, they sang this song to the Lord. But without verse 10, verse 11 doesn't really make much sense to include. Because verse 10 explains why they're celebrating or praising God. So 11 without 10 to me makes no sense to include. I would definitely include 10. Because the foundation of the Lord's temple had been laid. True. Fair enough. Okay. That one will be green. 11 will be yellow. Um, 12. I think kind of 12 sort of conflicts a little bit. I mean, yes, it is part of the reality of the situation. But I think it also doesn't necessarily, especially if we're already including 11, it doesn't necessarily speak to the main point being just that the foundation was laid. Do we really need so much to know how all of them felt about the foundation being laid? Not quite so much. So that one's a green at best, in my opinion. And we definitely don't need to we don't need to know how loud all the shouting and weeping was. So I would say not 13. So, any to delete. I guess 11 pretty well communicates what I was hoping people would get out of verse 10, so I might actually just nix that entirely. And do we really need to know when they started building? Probably not, especially since it doesn't mention in here when they completed it. I don't think. Yeah, so knowing when they started isn't really all that important if we don't know when they finished. Main premise out of the chapter as a whole is the rebuilding effort, I would say. Like, they build the altar first to try and, get themselves right with God and make sure that they're aligned with Him. And then they work on the foundation and complete that. I'd say those are the main things. So really, knowing when they started, not so necessary. And even really knowing how they felt isn't that important relative to just knowing that the foundation was laid after they built the altar. I might keep this one in here as a green, but I don't think any... I'm probably not going to use that one, honestly. I'll keep it as an option for now, though. I definitely think bare minimum 2, 6, and 11 need to be included. Okay. Next. Yeah, and I'm already like, how long have we taken with this? I think this is the last chapter. Haha, not even close. Ezra is 10 chapters. You're thinking of something more like Ruth, maybe. That's only 4 chapters. Unless you were saying you think this is the last chapter we'll be able to get in the stream. Which, that might be true. I don't know. It is coming up close to 2 hours of stream time. Well, then the rest I will just have to do on my own, because unless I try to tack some of it onto tomorrow's stream. But yeah, definitely if I want to get this edited in the time frame that I would like to have it done in, yeah, the rest will be all on me. Alright, so, Ezra chapter 4, enemies oppose the rebuilding, and it's still kind of the same premise. Later opposition is also enemies opposing. So those are the... Oh, and then right at the end here, it mentions the rebuilding resumes. Even though it didn't necessarily... Well, it does mention when it resumes, kind of. So, main premise is essentially people pushing back against the rebuild. Evidence from section 1 to support the main premise. Yeah. I mean, you could kind of say 1 and 2, but I think verse 4 is a little more succinct in communicating the main point. Local residents try to discourage and frighten the people of Judah to keep them from their work. Verses 1 and 2 pretty much are the people who don't want it to happen coming up to them and being like, hey, let us help you, even though they didn't actually want to help. They were going to sabotage it. So I'm saying highlight verse 4. I mean, they did also bribe people. That was part of it, but the main premise, I think, is better stated in verse 4 there. Maybe that'll be a green for verse 5. Verse 5 states a little bit more of what was done and for how long. But verse 4 states what they're doing and why. The primary reason I would consider maybe including verse 5 is just that it actually happened and likely slowed things down. But yeah, that's your point there, Seth, is why it's only maybe a green. Does it help the main premise of knowing that people were trying to slow down or even stop the rebuilding? I mean, I could always come back to it another time and make that decision, which is why I think I'll keep it green. I'm trying not to think too long and hard about this so I can actually make a little more progress on it. So section 2 evidence, I would say probably verse 6. Because it states that, like, hey, these people that didn't want the rebuild to happen went as far as, you know, writing a letter to the king. 7 kind of also says the same thing, just in a little bit more detail. A bunch of this, like, really 8 through 16 just kind of explains the contents of the letter that was sent to Artaxerxes in verse 7. 17 really just includes his reply. But really the end result of the letters is sort of the main point. So really it would be either 6 or 7. I'm inclined to say 6 just because it's a little bit shorter. But then also definitely verse 24. Because that's sort of the end result of the letters being sent. Um, 23 is just kind of another way of saying the end result, so it's probably not so necessary. the problem with including some of these other ones that are talking about the letters is that including some of that without other parts of the letter to give context would be really awkward. Because again, I'm trying to use like the text from the verses themselves a lot more so than my own words and summarizing. So I personally don't see much point in including any of the other verses aside from what we already have highlighted. The only possible exception to that might be verse 15. Put a green there. Because that gets into the... Of course, if I'm going to include that, then maybe I should include 7 instead of 6, because that's actually part of the letter that's mentioned in verse 7. But I'll move along for now. So this is still kind of under the section of resuming the rebuilding. I'd say verse 2 is important to include because it actually talks about them resuming the rebuilding anyway, despite the opposition. Okay, so then we've got Tatanai's letter to King Darius. And that a whole bunch of that isn't really necessary. I would maybe include verse 6 just to say that there was a letter for context, essentially, to then maybe include verse 17. Because that, I would say, is the big end result of the letter being sent. And really the main reason I would consider including that is just because that was sort of in response to the rebuilding resuming. So I guess that, although it is a little awkward to say, this is a copy of the letter, and then go all the way down to therefore. But summary. It's not getting all the details in a summary. Now, of course, if that context of knowing that there was a search of the Royal Archives requested isn't necessary, like, if that's not necessary for context for other stuff, then I might just get rid of that entirely and only include verse 2 from chapter 5. But, yeah. That's all I'd say from chapter 5. And Twitch ads are about to kick in here in a little bit. And that's all we have time for. Yep, pretty much. And Jate is indeed live, according to Seth. So I suppose we shall send the raid that way. I can definitely resume my own work on the rest of this sometime off stream. I appreciate the help from, I mean, really from Seth in particular. Yeah, okay. So I suppose we'll go ahead and wrap this up here in a bit, although it would be a little awkward to do that while the ad break is running. Yep. It does indeed seem like it would be the end of the stream. If I'm really trying to, you know, be halfway decent at actually having these be an hour shorter, yeah, I should go ahead and wrap this up. So, let me go ahead, get the Jate raid ready. Also, I'm going to go ahead and kill my background music here because I don't want that making the transition awkward. So, Jate live. Going there for the raid. I just realized I'm not in the right subsection of the raid window thing. There we go. There's Jate. I appreciate you trying to keep me on schedule there, Seth. Okay, so Raid of Jate is being initiated. So, that is going to do it from me. Apologies to anyone who was hoping maybe we'd get into Power Wash Simulator. I know I mentioned that, but it didn't actually happen. Maybe some other time. But that's going to do it for me. Tomorrow's going to be some Kingdom Hearts 3 endgame super boss stuff from the DLC for a couple hours. Next week will be more Bible study and something else, I don't know. Definitely a game for the second hour. After we do, you know, Nehemiah 5 and 6. And then next Friday, we'll be continuing Borderlands 4. That's the general gist of my streams coming up. Hopefully you'll tune in for one of those. Or I just see you soon in general. But otherwise, that's all I got for you. So until the next time I see y'all, stay cool, everybody.